Hello everyone, welcome back. So in this session, we are dealing with our fundamental right to freedom. So this is a very important right. So personal liberty is the most important of all our fundamental rights. So Article 19 to 22 deals with various aspects of these basic rights. So these five articles relating to our personal liberties, we have called it, or we have, we have been considering it the backbone of this whole of fundamental rights. So to take up Article 19 first, Article 19 contains 6 basic freedoms. So they are right to freedom of speech and expression, right to assemble peacefully and without arms. Now, right to form associations or unions or cooperative societies, right to move freely throughout the territory of India, right to reside and settle in any part of the territory, and finally the right to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business. Now, see, none of these fundamental rights to freedom or these 6 basic freedoms are absolute. So the state can always impose reasonable restrictions on them. What is reasonableness about restrictions? It simply means that whatever restrictions you impose have to be within the limits or within the framework of the constitution. Now, who decides whether they are reasonable or not? Of course, the courts decide whether they are reasonable or not. Now, this word reasonable here brings in the concept of judicial review. Okay, we have already seen what judicial review is. We saw that judicial review is the power or authority of the judiciary to examine whether a law passed by the legislature is reasonable or not. So, because you have to test reasonableness of restrictions in your right to freedom, this gives the scope of judicial review here. Now, most often states impose restrictions for the protection of sovereignty and integrity of the country, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign nations, morality, decency, contempt of court, defamation, and incitement of violence. Mostly ഈ കാരണങ്ങളാലാണ് restrictions impose ചെയ്യാറ്. Okay, so to move into the first right under Article 19, which is the right or the freedom of speech and expression. Freedom of speech and expression. See, this freedom includes freedom of press, and it ensures the right to express one's own view, the right to express somebody else's opinion, and also the right to have access to others' opinion. Okay, so now you see here that it ensures the right to express one's own opinion, right to express others' opinion, and right to have access to the opinion of others. So if you club these three together, you get the freedom of the press, because what the press does is these three things. They express their own opinion, they write somebody else's opinion, and the rest of the population have the right to access this opinion. So again, this is also subject to restrictions, as you know, all of these rights. So this right or the freedom of speech and expression includes numerous freedoms under it said. They include the right to propagate one's views, freedom of press, freedom of commercial advertisements, right against telephone tapping, right to telecast, right against bandh, right to know about government activities, freedom of silence, so right against imposition of pre-censorship on newspaper, right to demonstration or picketing, Okay, but not here, but not the right to strike. We do not have a constitutional right to strike. See, you see here freedom of silence. Um, if you want to know what is freedom of silence, to give you an example, there was a case in Kerala where three children were suspended from the school because they, they did not recite this national anthem. They stood up for the national anthem, they respected it, but they did not recite it, saying that this is against their religion. They will only, pray to their God, or they only want to recite the prayer. So they were suspended, and they went to the court, and the court said that yes, they have a freedom of silence, and we should note the fact that they respected the national anthem because they were standing up. The only thing is that they maintained silence, so they have the freedom of silence. So I was just giving you an example for that. Now, so these are the various grounds on which the state can impose reasonable restrictions. For example, speech, sovereignty and integrity, security of the state, friendly relations, public order, decency, morality, so and so. Now the next is freedom of assembly. Now, see, every citizen has the right to assemble peacefully and without arms. So, note these two words. They have the right to assemble, provided they do it peacefully and without arms. Now, this includes your right to hold public meetings, demonstrations, your processions, etc. But you can exercise this right only on a public land. You cannot use a private property or somebody else's property for exercising your freedom of assembly. And of course, it should be unarmed and peaceful. So again, here it should be noted that the freedom of assembly does not include your right to strike. The next is the freedom to form associations, or freedom of association. All citizens have the right to form associations or unions or cooperative societies. So this is part of your existence. You always have associations or societies or unions that look after the welfare, or that make sure that the rights of the people who are part of it is enforced. So now you have the right to form union, but it does not translate into a right to strike. So you do not have a right to strike. So that is the reason when government employees especially, they go on mass casual leave. They do not, even though they use this word strike, what they do is actually that they go on a mass casual leave. So, and again, when you have the freedom of association, it means you have the freedom to form associations, or you have the freedom to join or not to join any associations. So if you do not want to be part of any of these associations or unions, you have that freedom to do that. So now in armed forces, they do not have the right to form associations, and that is the reason why they have welfare societies or welfare associations rather. So this is true to the police force also. They have welfare association and not a union or a party. And welfare association, they have it common to all. Now the next is freedom of movement. You have your freedom of movement, which means that you have free movement across the country, provided it is subject to the security of India, especially the interest of scheduled tribes or the notified areas. See, your freedom of movement, or this freedom, entitles every citizen to move freely throughout the territory, and he can move freely from one state to another or from one place to another within a state. So this right actually enforces or underlines the idea that India is a single entity, we are one single unit, and we have a common citizenship. So as citizens of the same country, the single country, we can move throughout its territory. So this is in fact aimed at fostering the feeling of nationalism among the people. Now, there can be two restrictions on this freedom, on your freedom of movement. There can be two restrictions. Number one is that, there can be restrictions uh, in the interest of general public and the protection of interest of any scheduled tribes. So, two restrictions are: one, the interest of general public; two, protection of the interest of any scheduled tribe. See, in the case of scheduled tribes, we do this to protect their distinctive culture, language, tradition, and ethnicity. So you might know the example of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where the general public do not have any access to most of the areas. Now, for example, if I can give you an example for a restriction for general public. See, for example, the Supreme Court has held that the freedom of movement of prostitutes can be restricted on the ground of public health and in the interest of public morals. Now, there are two dimensions to your freedom of movement. Number one is the internal dimension, which is about your right to move inside the country. And then you also have the right to move out of the country and then come back to your country. This is the external aspect of your right to freedom. See, so your freedom of movement has two dimensions. One is the internal dimension, which is about the right to move within this country. This external dimension is about your right to move out of this country and come back to the same. So now Article 19 that we are talking about right now is only about your internal dimension of your freedom of movement. It talks only about your movement within this country. Now your movement out of this country and then coming back to this country is dealt with separately in Article 21. Okay, now the next freedom under the right to freedom is the freedom of residence. See, every citizen has the right to reside and settle in any part of this country. So it talks about two rights. One, they have the right to reside in any part of the country, and two, they can settle in any part of the country, which is more permanent in nature. Now, this again is also aimed at promoting nationalism among the people. See, very recently, you know that we had one state where this right did not apply, which was the Jammu and Kashmir, and very, very recently that was also removed. The restriction was removed. Now you have the right of residing even in Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, now coming to the reasonable restriction on your freedom of residence. The two grounds on which you place reasonable restrictions on your freedom of residence are the interest of general public and the protection of the interest of the scheduled tribes as usual. So the tribals have been given the right to have property rights, in accordance with their whatever customary laws and rules they were following in their tribe. The next is freedom of profession. Freedom of profession. According to this, you have the right to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade, or business. So, whatever is your means of earning your livelihood, you can carry out that. But even here, note that you have a restriction. Now, what are the likely restrictions on this? See, the profession that you practice should be social, subject to the social order, morality, decency, etc. And again, uh, you cannot carry out a trade or occupation that goes against the interest of the society. For example, hazardous chemicals. You cannot simply practice or trade hazardous chemicals or guns or weapons without abiding to the proper regulations by the government. Now, see here that when you have the right or the freedom of profession, the state has two rights in their hand. Number one, they can prescribe a professional or technical qualification necessary for the practice of that profession. See, for example, a few days back you might have seen the newspaper that the tattoo artist will now have to take a license from the government. So only those artists with a license can practice, because it was noted that when untrained or unprofessional people do with it or do this tattooing, it leads to health hazards or health complications later on for those who undergo it. So the government decided to make it a or brought a professional qualification to it. The government said you have to be a registered tattoo artist. So the government will set in place a proper mechanism for it. So the government can always prescribe a professional or a technical qualification so that you practice your profession. For example, the pharmacist, okay, or any other technical job. So not anybody can practice anything. So you have to be professionally qualified. So the government can always put in place regulations for that, or licenses, for example. And again, the state is empowered to carry on by itself any trade, business, industry or service, whether to the exclusion of the citizens or otherwise. Which means that the state can carry on a trade or business as a monopoly. Okay, the monopoly can be either complete or partial. Monopoly, I hope you understand what is monopoly. You have only one player in the market. If state is the monopoly, then state is the only player in the market. For example, if I can give you a very silly example, bread making, the normal bread that we buy in the bakeries. So if tomorrow the government monopolizes the making of bread or baking, so all other private players will be out of the scene. So the government will have a monopoly. So this monopoly can be either complete or partial. And interestingly, the state need not justify this monopoly. I know you have a difference of opinion, but this is what the Constitution says. We all have different opinions, of course. Now, your right to practice any profession does not include your right to carry on a profession or a business or a trade that is immoral. For example, trafficking, be it human trafficking or trafficking with women and children, you cannot practice those. So state can definitely prohibit or regulate those occupations. Now the next is a very important right, which is about Article 20. Now we are done with Article 19. Moving on to Article 20. It's about protection in respect of conviction for offences. Protection in respect of conviction for offences. Basically, Article 20 talks about the rights that you have, or the rights that you have during the conviction. Now, there are three provisions in Article 20 that we must be taking note of. Number one is no ex post facto law. No ex post facto law. See, it means that if a new law is made after the commission of an offence or a crime or an act, then no one can be convicted for an offence if the law is enacted after the commission of the act. So, if for example, you committed an offence let the offense be called X. So you committed an offense X. But when you committed this offense, there was no law in place which prescribed a punishment for this offense. But after the commission of this offense X by you, a new law was put in place, which said prescribed a certain punishment. Now, can you be made liable, or can you be convicted for an offense for if the law was not in place when you actually committed the offense? No. Okay, so when you actually committed the offense, if there was no law in place, then you cannot be convicted for it. And please note here that this is applicable only to criminal activities or criminal laws. This is not applicable to civil laws, especially tax related. See, for example, you can always impose tax with retrospective effect. I'm sorry. You can always impose tax with retrospective effect. But for criminal activities, you cannot have a retrospective effect for the law. Which means നിങ്ങൾ ഒഫൻസ് കമ്മിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത് നിയമം നിലവിലില്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ you cannot be punished. And there is one more aspect to it, one more aspect to this ex post facto law. See, you cannot also enhance the punishment after the commission of the offense or the act. Okay, so ഇപ്പം നിങ്ങൾ offense commit ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത്, for example, whatever the offense be, as a hypothetical example, the punishment was maybe 2 years imprisonment. So that was the punishment at the time of the commission of the offense or the act. Now, if an ex post facto law reduces the punishment, the accused can always take advantage of it. Okay, so നിങ്ങളുടെ കമ്മിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പം 2 years imprisonment ആയിരുന്നു, but later on a law came into place which said or which reduced the punishment from 2 years to 1 year. So you can always get the benefit of it. പക്ഷേ നേരെ തിരിച്ചാണെങ്കിൽ, if the law increases or enhances the punishment, you will not be given the enhanced or the increased punishment. I hope you get it. Listen to it very slowly and carefully. The next is no double jeopardy, which means no person shall be prosecuted and punished for the same offense more than once. Okay, so you cannot be punished or prosecuted for the same offense more than once. But ഇവിടെ വേറൊരു കാര്യമുണ്ട്. Please keep in mind that higher courts can always enhance the punishment which was awarded by the lower court. അതിന് തടസ്സമില്ല. പക്ഷേ you will not be punished for the same offense twice or more than once. Now the next is no self-incrimination, which means no person accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. No person accused of an offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. So this means that simply because somebody confesses before a police, he cannot be punished. So, but this changes when you confess before a magistrate. When you confess before a magistrate, that can be a reason for punishment. But if you confess before a police, that that cannot be valid unless the prosecution is able to prove it. So what should be noted here is that this protection against self-incrimination extends to both oral evidence and to documentary evidence. So this extends against both oral evidence and documentary evidence. But however, it does not extend to compulsory production of material objects, compulsion to give thumb impression, specimen signature, blood specimens, etc. Compulsory exhibition of the body. So these three things are excluded. And again, this extends only to criminal proceedings and not to civil proceedings. The next important right that we are taking up is Article 21, which is about the protection of your life and personal liberty. See, one thing let me tell you, very, very, very important. All your fundamental rights except Article 20 and 21 can be suspended. We had seen earlier that the President can suspend some of your fundamental rights during the operation of a national emergency. But remember that even during the operation of a national emergency, Article 20 and 21 cannot be suspended. What was Article 20? Article 20 was about, protection in respect of conviction for offences. And Article 21 is about protection of life and personal liberty. These are the two rights that can never be suspended, whatever the circumstances be. Now, moving on to Article 21, which is about protection of life and personal liberty. Okay, sorry for the trouble. Okay, so Article 21 says, no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. So nobody deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. So one thing to be noted here is that if you are actually following the procedure established by law, then your personal liberty or your life or personal liberty can be deprived of. Okay, this is one reason why we still have capital punishment in India. And remember here that this right is available to both citizens as well as non-citizens. So both citizens and non-citizens have been given this right to protect their life and personal liberty. So even here, this Article 21 is not absolute. I told you, if the procedure established by law is followed, even your life and liberty can be taken away. This is the reason why I cited the example of capital punishments. Now, see, this word liberty was earlier interpreted in a very narrow way. So earlier the view was that if the state is not violating the freedom of an individual or not harassing the individual, then his liberty is automatically taken care. But now, after the mid-1980s, the Supreme Court has given a very liberal interpretation of this word liberty. And because of this reason, Article 21 is said to have the widest amplitude in the Indian Constitution. So this word liberty has been interpreted in a very wide manner so that we increase the scope of expansion and incorporation of so many aspects of liberties into it. Okay. So we have been able to include a lot of human rights into the ambit of your right to life and personal liberty. This has been possible only through this liberal interpretation of Article 21 and especially the word liberty. If I can give you a few examples. See, for example, you have the right to travel abroad. uh, the domiciliary visit by police during night time is a violation of your right to liberty, which means the police cannot visit your place unless you have a criminal track record or unless there is a proven reason. Then you have the uh, right to a dignified life, which means you have the right to have facilities for nutrition, clothing, food, shelter. Even education is included in that. So these are all examples in which the word liberty has been interpreted in different ways by the court. For example, see, your text reads, the Supreme Court has reaffirmed its judgment in the Menega case and declared the following rights as part of Article 21, which includes right to live with human dignity, right to decent environment, livelihood, privacy, shelter, health, free education up to 14 years of age, a recent addition, free legal aid, speedy trial, so and so many things. Okay, free trial, right to information, yes. Okay, so many rights have been given under this. Now, moving on, we have the right to education, which is precisely Article 21A. So this was added, the right to education was added through the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002. Now this was a major milestone because till then this was included, or the aspect of giving elementary education to all the children was part of the directive principles only. So in 2002, to the 86th amendment, we made it a fundamental right. So the state shall now provide free and compulsory education to all the children up to the age of 14 years, precisely 6 to 14 years. So what is to be noted here is that this provision makes only elementary education fundamental and not higher education. So when we added this 21A to the Constitution as an 86th amendment, at the same time we added a fundamental duty to the list of fundamental duties. So under 51A we inserted this new provision that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to provide opportunities for education to his child or ward between the age of 6 to 14 years. So it shall be the duty of every parent, it shall be the fundamental duty of every parent to make sure that their child gets education between the age of 6 and 14 years. Now the next is Article 22, which is about protection against arrest and detention. Protection against arrest and detention. Now you have certain rights during arrest. Number one, nobody shall be arrested without being informed of the reason for arrest. So the 4 rights that you have during arrest is that number one, nobody shall be arrested without being informed of the reason for arrest. Number 2, arrested person has a right to consult or to be defended by a lawyer of his choice. Number 3, and the detained person should be presented in front of a magistrate within 24 hours. And finally, 4th one, the detained person cannot be kept in custody beyond the time prescribed by the judge. Now, these are the rights that you have when you are arrested under the ordinary law. Okay, so these are your constitutional protections of arrested persons under ordinary law. Now, when I say ordinary law, there should be something, which is not, there should be a law which is not so ordinary. Okay, and what is it? That is preventive detention. Preventive detention. So, if somebody is arrested under preventive detention, then the 4 rights that we just talked about will not be available to them. Now, these rights cannot be claimed by an enemy alien also. Now, who is an enemy alien? Enemy alien is a person belonging to a country with which India is in a state of declared war. So, okay, anyway, that's not very important for you. Now, these are the rights that you have when you are arrested under ordinary law. Now, the second set of laws are any law that provides for preventive detention. Now, in the first set of law, which is punitive detention, you are detaining somebody because the person has already committed the offense. Now, in preventive detention, on the other hand, you are arresting a person before they have actually committed the crime. So, you are anticipating that the person might commit the so and so offense. So, there are so many critiques about it. People say this is like branding people, and most of the Western liberal democracies do not have this idea of a preventive detention. But whatever it be, we do have it in India, and mostly they have this label of being draconian laws. So, according to preventive detention laws, a person can be detained for a maximum of 3 months. So, under the preventive detention law, whichever the law be, if you are in preventive detention, then you have the following rights. Number 1, the detained person cannot exceed the detention of the person cannot exceed 3 months unless an advisory board reports sufficient cause for extended detention. So, unless a proper advisory board gives sufficient reasons on which the detention should be extended, nobody can be detained beyond 3 months. And second is, the grounds of detention should be communicated to the detainee or the person who is detained. So, the person who is detained should be made or informed of the ground of preventive detention. But again, see here, the facts considered to be against the public interest need not be disclosed. Now, again, the detainee or the detained person or the detainee should be afforded an opportunity to make a representation against the detention order. So, the person who has been detained should be given a chance to represent against the detention or against his detention. And now, this is all about your right to or the right against arrest and detention. So, under this we saw rights during arrest under ordinary law, and then rights during arrest and detention under preventive detention law. So, if I can give you a few examples for preventive detention laws made by the Parliament, you have the Maintenance of Internal Security Act or MISA, which is not there today, that it was repealed. Then you have Prevention of Terrorism Act, POTA, which again was also repealed. So, then you have Preventive Detention Act of 1950, which was the very first of its kind. That also have expired. So, this is about today's class. Thank you all.